The menstrual cycle. The menstrual cycle is an exclusive unit under human reproductive system. It has a special place or a slot under every examination. The entire exams, which covers human reproductive system, actually separate the topic into two parts. We have the anatomical part that deals with the parts and the functions. And then sometimes you have to draw a label, as well as the description of processes like spermatogenesis and oogenesis. The other component of human reproductive system deals exclusively with the menstrual cycle. Hence, in every exams is something you should expect. It's an area you should actually expect. It is a detailed part of human reproductive system. It involves a lot of explanations and then some amount of labeling and stating of functions. So let's go into the concept or the topic on the menstrual cycle, and then let us explore the things we need to know. Right. So we have here the menstrual cycle. It is very, very crucial since it is actually an indicator of pregnancy. It is a concept you need to know with regards to pregnancy. And it is also a monthly process. In other words, the menstrual cycle is a monthly process, and that occurs in individuals with a uterus, most specifically females. But in this regard, we'll be dealing with human females. So it is a monthly process. Typically, it takes about 28 days. Hence, we call it the 28 days cycle. So you need to know another way of calling the menstrual cycle, or another terminology for the menstrual cycle is the 28 days cycle. You have to take note of that. This cycle is fully regulated by hormones. So, as it appears there, there are a lot of stuff we're going to explain using these hormones. And then it involves changes in the ovaries, and then as well as changes in the uterine lining. Another word for uterine lining is the word endometrium. Now, these changes occur to prepare for a possible pregnancy. So, this is what we're about to learn. We're going to learn about the hormones. We're going to study about the changes that occurs in the ovaries, and then as well as the changes that occur in the uterine lining, with the sole aim that pregnancy might occur. Well, with the menstrual cycle, we're going to also explore um, its component. So the menstrual cycle consists of the uterine cycle. The word uterine comes from the word uterus. And then secondly, we have the ovarian cycle. Another word for the ovarian cycle, actually, the word ovarian comes from the word ovary. So we're going to look at the cycle of the ovary, and then we're going to look at the cycles of the uterus. So let's know for certain the menstrual cycle consists of two cycles. The first one is the uterine cycle. The second one is the ovarian cycle. Well, the menstrual cycle is divided into two closely related cycles. So we are still on those two cycles like we saw in the previous slide. So here we have the ovarian cycle. We might therefore be interested in finding out, why do we call it the ovarian cycle? The reason is because it refers to the changes occurring in the ovaries. So over there inside the ovaries, we have follicle development, and then we have ovulation. So that is the term there and its meaning. Secondly, the menstrual cycle consists of the uterine cycle. And the reason why we call it the uterine cycle is because it refers to the changes occurring in the endometrium. Now, take note carefully. Another word for endometrium is the word uterine lining. Good. Now, let us now look at the key hormones in the menstrual cycle. There's many several hormones, but for the sake of the curriculum and for the sake of the exams, there are only a number of hormones, a specific number of hormones that we are allowed to you're allowed to know so that you can be assessed on in this regard. So the first hormone is estrogen. And what does it do? For each of the hormones, you're supposed to know their functions. So estrogen stimulates the thickening of the endometrium, also called the uterine lining. The second hormone is progesterone. What does it do? It increases and maintains the thickening of the endometrium, which is also called uterine lining, in preparation for implantation. Take note, the functions of estrogen and progesterone, they are closely related. They are both dealing with the same thing. However, the functions of progesterone is there to increase and as well as to maintain what estrogen started. Estrogen started the thickening of the endometrium. Progesterone is there to increase and to maintain it. The other difference between estrogen and progesterone rests in their sources, as we'll be seeing that later on. The next hormone to know about is FSH. What is FSH? FSH refers to follicle stimulating hormone. So FSH means follicle stimulating hormone. What does it do? It stimulates the development of the follicle, or it stimulates follicle development. Now, the last but not the least is LH. LH stands for luteinizing hormone. What does luteinizing hormone do during the menstrual cycle? It does two things. The first thing it does is to stimulate ovulation. So it stimulates ovulation. And the second thing is that it does is that it stimulates the formation of the corpus luteum. So let's take note. Let's take note of it. So in a nutshell, we all know the menstrual cycle is controlled by hormones. There are many several hormones, but for the sake of the curriculum and for the sake of examination, there are only four hormones that you need to know, and they are estrogen, progesterone, follicle stimulating hormone, and luteinizing hormone. You're supposed to know the names of these hormones, their sources, and the role. Another word for the word role is the word function they play during the menstrual cycle. Well, so since we know the menstrual cycle is divided into the ovarian and the uterine cycle, I'm going to start with the ovarian cycle. Now, the ovarian cycle consists of a number of phases. Actually, if we look at the ovarian cycle, it consists of the following phases. One, we have the development of the Graafian follicle. Two, we have ovulation. And lastly, we have formation of the corpus luteum. Hence, there are three phases under the ovarian cycle. For the sake of the curriculum and for the sake of examination, we are supposed to know the three phases. So, we have development of the Graafian follicle. Another word for development is the word growth. The growth of the Graafian follicle, the process of ovulation, and formation of the corpus luteum. Well, now let's start with um, the, the ovarian cycle and let's look at its three phases. That is the development of the Graafian follicle, ovulation, and then the corpus luteum formation. So we have a diagram on your screen. I'm going to remove certain things there because they are not relevant. Good. So we have what we need for our study today. Here we are. That is a diagram of the ovary, and we have actually gone inside the ovary. So we are inside the ovary. If you remember carefully, you can take your note and check the functions of the ovary. It does two things, among many other things. It does two major things. It is the site for oogenesis. Is a site or is a place where oogenesis occur. We know oogenesis occurs by meiosis. So it is one of the meiotic site, or is a site from meiosis, as we know from the topic on the meiosis. And then it also does another thing. It is a place where estrogen and progesterone are secreted. So the ovary performs two functions: secretion of estrogen and progesterone, and then secondly, this is also the site where the ovum is formed. So we are inside there. You can see the diagram. You can see a lot of things are happening. Colors are changing, sizes are increasing, and what is happening here is what we call oogenesis. Oogenesis deals with the formation of ovum, and it occurs by the process of meiosis. So let's see how the ovarian cycle occurs in a brief moment. So here, everything starts with the pituitary gland, which is located at the base of the brain. And the pituitary gland, during the ovarian cycle, secretes a hormone called FSH, follicle stimulating hormone. If you remember in our previous slide, you can take your textbook and go to the table of hormones and check for yourself the functions of FSH. FSH is there to stimulate the development of the Graafian follicle. In fact, if you look at the name of that hormone FSH, what it does is it stimulate the follicle, it stimulate the development of follicle. In fact, then the name suggests it's a follicle stimulating hormone. So if you look at it in reverse, it means a hormone that stimulates follicle development. So what does it do? This hormone is secreted by the pituitary gland. It actually causes these circular structures that you are seeing here, these round structures you are seeing there, to develop. What do you call these round structures? If you follow the arrow, you can actually tell these are what we call the primordial follicle. You're not supposed to know the name primordial follicle for exam because that word is not necessary. But then you need to know about the word Graafian follicle. So there is your follicle. Inside the follicle, we have the ovum, and it looks so small. And if you follow the arrow carefully, you can see the circles are getting larger and larger in size. And the reason is because the hormone FSH will cause the primordial follicle to develop. Another word for the word develop is the word grow, or to increase in size. The increase in size is what is called growth or development. This hormone will cause this primordial follicle to develop into the primary follicle. And then if you look at the primary follicle very well, you can see it has actually increased in size again. It keeps on getting larger and larger. And all these things are happening still under the influence of FSH. It is the functions of follicle stimulating hormone to make sure that this tiny primordial follicle becomes larger and larger, or develops or grow in size until they become fully matured. And if you observe carefully, you can see there is this yellowish structure that is within the primary follicle as well as the developing follicle. Now, the main purpose of the development of this follicle is to form the ovum. And what do you need the ovum for? The ovum is formed so that if fertilization occur, it will lead to the formation of a zygote, and that zygote will develop. In the case of humans, it will develop into a new human or into a new embryo that will grow by mitosis to become a new human. Hence, in as much as the follicle is developing during the process of follicular development, in anticipation for possible fertilization, this developing follicle, remember the word is developing follicle, they are not fully developed. Hence, this developing follicle, in other words, as these follicles keeps on developing, as they are developing, they start secreting another hormone. And this hormone is called estrogen. What does this estrogen do during the ovarian cycle? It stimulates the thickening of the endometrium in preparation or in anticipation for implantation, even without copulation taking place. Even without ejaculation occurring in the female, the ovarian cycle, which is part of the female's body, the reproductive cycle expects that fertilization will occur, possibly, and then in the process, implantation will occur. In other words, it is occurring in preparation for pregnancy. So even before the follicle is fully matured, whilst it is developing, along the way and simultaneously it starts secreting the hormone estrogen. Hence, two things are happening at the same time. One is the development of the follicle. The follicle is growing, and as it is growing, it won't wait until it is fully grown or it is fully matured. As it is in the process of growing, it starts producing the hormone estrogen. So that by the time the ovum is released, the endometrium is actually fully prepared to receive the zygote, and eventually the embryo should fertilization occur. So, estrogen start taking in the endometrium in preparation for implantation. During that process, during that event, the follicle is still developing. FSH is still causing the follicle to develop. And this process will continue until the follicle becomes matured. When a follicle is fully matured, we no longer call it just a follicle or a developing follicle. Now we call it a Graafian follicle. So a Graafian follicle is a fully matured or a fully grown or a fully developed follicle. Now, remember, it was the pituitary gland that started the process. It was a pituitary gland that caused the primordial follicle to start growing. Hence, when the follicle becomes fully matured, when it becomes a Graafian follicle, what started the process will also have to end it. Hence, the pituitary gland will now detect that the follicle is fully matured and hence will secrete another hormone. And this hormone is what is called luteinizing hormone. What will luteinizing hormone do here in this particular case? Luteinizing hormone will cause ovulation. What happens during ovulation? During ovulation, the ovum is released. Here on your screen, we have the word liberated. Liberated means it is released or it is freed. That is, it comes out of the Graafian follicle. In other words, the Graafian follicle, which is like a bag, will break open. And once it breaks open, the ovum, which was inside of it, will now come out. So, um, the pituitary gland is actually what will release the hormone luteinizing hormone to cause ovulation to occur. So, that is what happens. The follicle it breaks open. Another word for break open is ruptured, and then the ovum is liberated. So once the ovum is liberated, we say ovulation has occurred. So that is what you see there. Anytime you see such a diagram in exam, they ask you, what do you call this process? This process is called ovulation. Then sometimes you may be asked again, what hormone is responsible for ovulation? And you have to get it right. It is luteinizing hormone, abbreviated as LH. All right. So one of the things you should also take note of on your screen uh, is the color change. Realize that the Graafian follicle appeared brownish red, but then immediately after ovulation, you realize that the color change is now appearing pale yellow or broken yellow. It looks more or less like whitish yellow in color, but actually it's yellowish. So we started with something brownish red. Now at the end, in a natural process, when after ovulation had occurred, now the Graafian follicle, which was the bag that contained the ovum, it changes color. And once the color changes, now we no longer call it Graafian follicle. Now we call it corpus luteum. So now we have the ovum inside the fallopian tube at this stage, and it's moving along the fallopian tube, or waiting to be fertilized if there are sperms there, and eventually it will be implanted. So this corpus luteum, you can see here from your screen, we have the early corpus luteum, which was a bit smaller, and then you have the corpus luteum itself, which appears larger. Now, these are very important indicators of pregnancy because implantation means the person is at least is pregnant. Um, what will the corpus luteum do? The corpus luteum, like I showed you earlier, this is how it appears. It appears a bit smaller, but then it keeps on getting larger. If the corpus luteum gets larger, it means the person is fully pregnant. And what will the corpus luteum do in this case? It secretes another hormone, and that hormone is progesterone. What does it do? It stimulates and maintains the endometrium by making it more thicker, more vascular, and more glandular. These three words are very important. These are descriptive, but these are three adjectives which are very important. Remember, the function of progesterone is to improve what estrogen started. And for pregnancy to be maintained, the endometrium is supposed to be thicker. It should be very thick so that miscarriage won't occur. Miscarriage will occur if implantation fails, if it is not successful. So, in anticipation for a possible implantation, progesterone will secrete the hormone. Progesterone will stimulate and maintain the endometrium by making it more thicker, more vascular, and more glandular. And if you look carefully, like I showed you, like if you follow the arrow, you realize that the black arrow from the corpus luteum, realize that the corpus luteum gets larger. It became larger than the second corpus luteum. And in that sense, more progesterone will be released because the reason is progesterone is released by corpus luteum, or corpus luteum is the source of progesterone. The larger the size of corpus luteum, the more the level of progesterone that will be secreted in the blood. The smaller the corpus luteum size, the lower or the lower the amount of progesterone that will be secreted. Hence, it's a very good indicator for pregnancy. But then if you look carefully, you can see here in this particular female's ovary, it was detected that the corpus luteum kept on reducing in size. It became large in the second diagram, but then it reduced in size for for some strange reason, and we need to know what could be the case because, like we said earlier on, these are good indicators. So if you look here from here to here, you can see the corpus luteum actually it became larger, and then from here to here, now all of a sudden it has become very small. So when it happens like that, we say the corpus luteum has degenerated. There are different ways you can use. We have words like it has degenerated or it has shrunk in size. And these are all good indicators. If the composition gets smaller, it means that the quantity of progesterone release will be very little, it will be low. And that means the person is not pregnant. It also means fertilization did not occur. If fertilization did not occur, then what's going to happen to the ovum that was released? Because an ovum is formed after every 28 days. So an ovum was formed in the previous 28 days and it wasn't fertilized, meaning the person wasn't pregnant. So what's going to happen? Once the corpus luteum degenerates, it means a new it means the level of progesterone will decrease, yes, and then a new follicle will have to form. Like I said earlier on, if corpus luteum degenerate, the level of progesterone level of progesterone will decrease, and that means what is going to happen next? Because the ovum won't be fertilized, it will be menstruated. It will pass out from the person, from the female, as blood, what is called menstruation. And the cycle will have to start all over again. The pituitary gland will detect the low levels of progesterone, and then it will cause the level of follicle stimulating hormone to increase so that a new follicle will have to form. So you can see the cycle keeps on going on and on until the person becomes pregnant. And for the next 9 months, no follicle will form until the person falls pregnant again. All right. So there you have it. If the level of progesterone is low, pituitary gland will secrete more FSH to start the whole process again. Okay, so let us look at it. Let us just look at we're going to look at a breakdown of what goes on or during the menstrual cycle. So on your screen, we have some diagrams there. Observe the colors, very important, and observe the sizes and appearance. So we have the growing follicle, and then we have corpus luteum in between. We have ovulation. So let's look at how to interpret this. So everything starts this way. Um, all right, so everything starts this way. FSH stimulates a primary follicle to become a Graafian follicle, which contains a mature ovum. So that's what you are seeing here. You can see, starting from our left to right, you can see that blue circle. It increased in size. It grew by becoming larger and larger and larger. And this is what is called growing ovarian follicle. And it occurs under the influence of FSH. Then it continues to say, as the Graafian follicle develops, it produces the hormone estrogen, increasing the estrogen levels in the blood. Around day 14, the Graafian follicle ruptures, breaks open, and releases an ovum in a process called ovulation. So that's what we have here. That's the process of ovulation. Um, this is what happens when ovulation is occurring. So over here, you can see by the diagram that the ovum is being released. So that's the ovum, and this structure here is the Graafian follicle, and it has ruptured, releasing the ovum in a process called ovulation. Ovulation is stimulated by the luteinizing hormone, also abbreviated as LH, which is released by the pituitary gland. The LH causes the ruptured Graafian follicle to change into a structure called corpus luteum. So you can tell we started with these blue structures here. Immediately after ovulation, it changed and became yellow, what is called the yellow body. Another word for yellow body is the word corpus luteum. And the corpus luteum is formed also by luteinizing hormone. So one more time, luteinizing hormone causes ovulation, it stimulates ovulation. It has two functions. It stimulates ovulation, that is one. Two, it causes the Graafian follicle to change into a structure called corpus luteum, or it stimulates the formation of the corpus luteum. Well, now let's take note of the following. The corpus luteum secretes the hormone progesterone, and thus increasing the levels of progesterone in the blood. If fertilization does not take place, the corpus luteum shrinks. Another word for shrink, or the word for shrinks, is the word degenerates, or becomes smaller. And then it will become so small until it eventually stops producing progesterone. Now, what's going to happen to the ovum? The ovum will now pass down the fallopian tube, and then it will enter the uterus and then leaves the body through the process of menstruation. All right. Now, in as much as you are doing it for examination sake, sometimes in most textbooks they use the word egg. We mostly confuse the word egg and an ovum. What's the difference? Simply, an ovum is the unfertilized female gamete, whereas the egg is a structure where embryonic development occurs. So this is just a simple scenario, and make sure you don't confuse the two. And throughout this topic, I'll be using the word ovum as prescribed by the curriculum, by the ATP and the exams guide. Good. Now that we are done with the ovarian cycle, let's go to the uterine cycle. So the uterine cycle, it refers to the changes occurring in the endometrium. Another word for endometrium is a word uterine. That's uterine lining. Take note of that. So another word for endometrium is uterine lining. Now the uterine cycle consists of two phases, and over here we have changes in the thickness. Take note here, the key word we are interested in the thickness. So that is the area we're going to concentrate on. So under the phases, we have changes in the thickness of the endometrium, and then we have menstruation itself. So here there are only two phases, whereas on the ovarian cycle we have three phases. Do not forget them according to the order: development of the grafting follicle, secondly, ovulation, and thirdly, we have formation of the corpus luteum. In the uterine cycle, we have only two phase events or phases. We have changes in the thickness of the endometrium, and secondly, we have menstruation. So let's look at this diagram as we explore the uterine cycle. Like we said, it consists of one. Here we are looking perfectly or mainly at the thickness. So here we are looking at the thickness of the endometrium. Another word for endometrium, do not forget, is the word uterine lining. So that's what we are looking. We are focusing on the thickness of the uterine lining or the endometrium, and then we're also going to look at menstruation. So in doing so, because this is not a video, but it's just a picture, how will you know if menstruation is occurring as a continuous process? So we are going to know it by looking at the first diagram. So the first diagram, you can see that is how menstruation is drawn. And over here, you can see there are some things falling down. There's few drops, okay, which is passing out through the vaginal area. Here we have the vaginal canal, and that's where we have those things falling down. This is what is called menstruation. And what we are looking at is that we are looking at the endometrium breaking down, and we need to provide an explanation as to why the endometrium is breaking down, because we learned previously that the endometrium becomes thicker in preparation for implantation. That means the person is pregnant. So why will it break down here? And the answer is because say fertilization did not occur. So menstruation occurs if fertilization doesn't occur. And what is menstruation? It's simply the breakdown of the endometrium, and it occurs if menstruation does not occur. Immediately after menstruation, after some few days, that is, it lasts for some few days averagely. So immediately after fertilization, after menstruation, you can see in the second screen that there is no event happening. There is no menstruation going on. The process of menstruation is over, and then you can see this red lining. There's a red lining there, and you can see here that the endometrium is reforming, is developing again. It has actually developed and it has reformed. Okay, and if you compare it to the second diagram, you realize that it has actually become thicker, because don't forget we are dealing with the thickness of the endometrium. So if you compare the two diagrams, the first one, and you look at it in the second diagram, you can tell that there is actually an increase in thickness. The second diagram, the endometrium is almost twice as thick as the first one. We need to be able to provide a reason for it. What is causing this endometrium to become thicker? Okay, that is if we compare the two diagrams. And there we have it. Here, the endometrium thickens under the influence of estrogen secreted by the developing follicle. So the reason why the endometrium is thickening up is because estrogen is being secreted by the developing follicle, and is happening in preparation for implantation. Now, immediately after, you can actually tell that ovulation has occurred. So, as the endometrium keeps on getting thick, we see ovulation occurs here. Then, immediately after ovulation, as you can see here in this diagram, the endometrium has actually become extremely thick, or it has become even more thicker compared to the other diagram in the follicular phase. In this phase, the endometrium has really become so thick, more than twice thicker, and we have to be able to provide an explanation for what is happening here. What is responsible for this thickness of the endometrium? So the answer is that the endometrium becomes more thicker. Remember, it was thicker before, so it has become more thicker. It has become more glandular. meaning it consists of several glands, and then it has become more vascular. That means it's very rich with blood vessels, or it is highly vascularized. And all these things are happening under the influence of progesterone. And this progesterone is secreted by the corpus luteum. And remember, immediately after ovulation, corpus luteum is formed. And corpus luteum secretes progesterone to cause the endometrium to become even more thicker, more glandular, and more vascular. The functions of progesterone occurs after estrogen. Estrogen makes the endometrium thicker. Progesterone makes it even more thicker. Now you can't make something more thicker if that thing isn't already thick. So yeah, the thing will have to first of all become thick, and then you can make it more thicker. Or the thing must be thicker so that you can make it more thicker. All right, so that is the uterine cycle. Okay, so let's look at everything, the whole cycle in context. So on your screen, we have time, which is the on the x-axis, and we have endometrial thickness on the y-axis. So let's look at the events that is occurring in stage one. So during stage one, the endometrium breaks down and is released. Uh, this is called menstruation. So that's how menstruation is represented, and you have to know how long it lasts. It lasts approximately 4 to 7 days on the average. Then, if you go to stage two, you can see there is a buildup of there's a reformation and a buildup of the endometrium. It's becoming more thicker. And what is happening there? Here, the endometrium is stimulated by estrogen to become thicker and develop more blood vessels and glands. So that's what is actually happening. And then we go to stage three. We have to be able to explain what is causing the endometrium to become even more thicker. Checking the thickness there, it's extremely thicker than stage one and two. And what is responsible? So here we see that progesterone stimulates the endometrium to become even more thicker and develop more blood vessels and more glands. So that is actually that's actually what we are looking at. And this thing occurs after day 14. We know day 14 is crucial because it is the day on which ovulation occurs. And after ovulation, the corpus luteum is formed. And corpus luteum is actually the structure that secretes progesterone. The larger the corpus luteum, the higher the amount of progesterone that will be released, and then the more thicker and more vascular and more glandular the endometrium becomes. Now, why should endometrium become more thicker, more vascular, and more glandular? This happens in preparation for possible implantation of the fertilized ovum. That is, if there are sperms to fertilize the ovum. Then we go to stage number four. You can, unfortunately, even though the endometrium became extremely thick, it dropped, it decreased uh, after some time towards day 28, and we have to be able to provide an explanation for it. And the reason is because here it is dropping in thickness. The thickness is decreasing if fertilization does not take place. And the reason because uh, fertilization did not occur, as a matter of fact. Hence, the endometrium tears away. And another way of saying the endometrium tears away is the word breaks down. So the endometrium breaks down and it results in menstruation. So that is the uterine cycle. Still, we are on the hormonal control of the menstrual cycle. That is both ovarian and uterine. Remember, there are four hormones involved, and with reference to their function. The first is FSH, followed by estrogen, then LH, followed by progesterone. Now, this is the table of hormones I was referring to. You have it in your notes. Make sure you study them very well. We have the glands secreting the hormone, and we have the hormone itself, and then we have the functions of the hormone. So, if you look at it carefully, you can see pituitary gland secretes two hormones. We have FSH and LH. These two hormones are secreted by the pituitary gland. FSH stimulates the development or growth of the follicle, whereas LH does two things. One, stimulates ovulation, and remember, secondly, it stimulates the formation of the corpus luteum. The second two classes of hormones here are estrogen and progesterone. They come from the same source. where estrogen is secreted by the developing follicle in the ovaries and is there to thicken the endometrium. Progesterone secreted by corpus luteum also in the ovaries and is also there to maintain the thickness of the endometrium. If fertilization occur, if the woman is fully pregnant, an extra amount of progesterone will be released into the blood. But this time, it won't come only from the corpus luteum. That extra amount of progesterone won't come from the corpus luteum. It will come from the placenta, and it is only present if the person is fully pregnant. And this extra amount of progesterone will actually uh, continue to maintain pregnancy by maintaining the thickness of the endometrium. Now, for examination's sake, all these four hormones are classified. I've classified these four hormones for convenience sake, for you to know what they do. And their classification is based on their origin. So, of the four hormones, two of them are classified as pituitary hormones, and they are FSH and LH. Why do we call them pituitary hormones? It's because they are secreted by the pituitary glands. The other remaining, that is estrogen and progesterone, they are classified as ovarian hormones. Why do we call them ovarian hormones? It's because they are secreted by the ovary. It's very important for you to know what the ovarian hormones are and what the pituitary hormones are, because in exams you'll be told on several occasions that the following hormones are pituitary hormones, and maybe their names are not given, but then you are given some letters like A and B. You're supposed to identify A, what do you call this hormone? B, what do you call that hormone? If you're supposed to list pituitary hormones and you go and list ovarian hormones, your answer should be wrong and everything under it will also be wrong. And the examiner will make sure that they tell you, they'll give you a heading. All the time, they'll give you a heading, they'll tell you that the following hormones are pituitary hormones or they are ovarian hormones. So you need to master and know what the ovarian hormones are. You have to memorize the names of the pituitary hormones and the names of the ovarian hormones. One of the tricks you can use to help yourself whilst you are studying is to come out with ways that will help you to remember. And it is best to concentrate on one hormonal group so that it will help you to know the other. I recommend you memorize ovarian hormone because the word ovary starts with the letter O. And you just have to find out, is there any hormone that also starts with the letter O? And you discover that it is estrogen. So the ovarian hormones here are estrogen, and estrogen also starts with the letter O. And estrogen as a hormone works together perfectly with progesterone. So, and their functions are almost similar. So, once you can remember estrogen, you can, by memory technique, memorization technique, also remember progesterone. At least if you are counting the alphabet, you count O before you go to P. It is like, for example, MNOP. So O comes before P, and that is the correct order. Estrogen is released first before progesterone. And with the letter O, you can remember ovarian hormone, and the letter O can also help you to remember estrogen. And by order of reciting the alphabet, you can also remember the word progesterone. These are memorization technique. And there are only two of them and the ovarian hormones. Once you know the ovarian hormones, the rest becomes a bonus for you because the rest will be pituitary hormones and that will be follicle stimulating hormone. So you need to come out with a trick and then alongside LH to remember uh, whatever you have. If you have your own way of remembering it, you can apply because it is very important. Check for the heading in every exams. They will tell you this chart represents ovarian hormone or pituitary hormones. If the title of the question tells you this chart represents pituitary hormones, then you must start thinking about FSH and LH. Once you mix them up, everything falls apart. So it's good to know pituitary hormones and their names and functions, and you must also know about ovarian hormones, their names and function. Let's look at this question. Describe the role of the ovarian hormones in the reproductive process. So that's a typical question. He didn't say explain, he said describe. Describe means state the functions as they are or write it as they are. So he's not asking you to add your views. He's simply talking about the functions. by asking you to describe the role of the ovarian hormones in the reproductive cycle. So you see here, they were told ovarian hormone. The question actually specified by mentioning you're supposed to describe what? The ovarian hormones. So, like I said, if you know your ovarian hormones, you can easily answer it and write the functions down. Otherwise, you must, like I told you earlier, use the letter O in the word ovarian, and then you begin to start thinking, is there any hormone that starts with the letter O? And you discover that we have estrogen, and estrogen goes with progesterone. So this is how you answer it. You must state the names of the ovarian hormones and describe their functions. So, what are the ovarian hormones? They are estrogen and progesterone. And then you simply write their functions, stating that estrogen stimulates the thickening of the endometrium in preparation for possible implantation. Progesterone stimulates the endometrium to become more thicker, more glandular, and more vascular. So we have this chart here, the menstrual cycle chart, and it's divided into 28 days. And then over here, that is what we call the pituitary hormones. And it will be told you'll be told all the time that these hormones are pituitary hormones. Then maybe they'll not give you the names of the hormones, and then they'll just put A where we have FSH, and maybe B where we have LH, and then they'll ask you, what do you call this hormone? And you must come up with a technique that will help you to remember. If you look at the chart, you can see that FSH is slightly higher than LH. How will you know if that line represent FSH and that line represent LH? You have to know that FSH starts by being on top of LH, and you must come out with a trick or a method that will help you to remember. You know, F, when you're reciting alphabet, F comes before L, so F is on top of L, and that will help you to actually champion your memory. Or you have to know on day 14, the hormone that is actually released the most is actually LH. So once you, and that's another way of remembering, once you know that the hormone on that is on top of day 14 is LH, automatically the second hormone will be FSH. But you must always pay attention that this chart, it represents um, pituitary hormones. The second one, we are looking at the growth of follicle. Another word for growth is the word development. So that is the follicle developing, and you have to be able to explain what caused or what happened on day 14. So you can see on day 14, uh, something there. We have these two circles. So in other words, on day 14, ovulation occurred, and on that same day 14, you realize that the hormone LH is a very high in quantity. The level of LH is very high, and the reason because LH is responsible for this particular process happening here. So LH caused ovulation. Immediately after ovulation, we have a new structure forming, what is called corpus luteum. And from the screen, you can see the corpus luteum is getting smaller and smaller and smaller. And that should tell you that the person is not pregnant or fertilization did not occur. Hence, the person is not pregnant. If you go to the pituitary hormone side, you realize that, like I said, FSH is high between day 0 and day 7. And but if you look towards day 28, you realize that the level rose. It begins to rise up again. FSH is there to stimulate the development of a new follicle. If ovulation does not, if fertilization does not occur, then a new ovum will have to form. Oogenesis will have to reoccur. Then, if you check uh, C, that's where we have the ovarian hormone. So over here, like I said earlier on, there are two ovarian hormones. We have estrogen, and then the second one we have progesterone. So again, how will you know if this represent estrogen and this represent progesterone? Again, you discover that O is on top of P. The level of estrogen is higher, or it is first. In fact, estrogen is released first before progesterone. So you can actually tell from here, the one on top is estrogen, the one below is progesterone. This is just a technique that will help you to remember. Once you're able to label estrogen correctly that it is on top, automatically progesterone will actually follow. If you mix them up, everything will be wrong. That is a major concern for me. I don't want you to miss it. And don't confuse. In exams, you'll be told that these are ovarian hormones. So it has been told you here, look out for the word ovarian hormone, and we have estrogen and progesterone. The level of progesterone dropped on day 28, but then from day 14 to day 21, the level of progesterone increased. It rose. There was an increase. And the reason because it was during that same period that corpus luteum was formed. And corpus luteum is responsible for releasing progesterone. And from day 21 to day 28, the level of progesterone dropped. Okay. The reason why it dropped was because the source of that hormone, the source of progesterone, also reduced in size. As you can see, this is the corpus luteum, and it became smaller and smaller and smaller. And the smaller the corpus luteum, the lower the level of progesterone. Now, these two hormones, progesterone and estrogen, they affect the endometrium. So that will take us to D. And here we concentrate on the thickness. Here we don't talk about level, we talk about thickness. At C, we talk about the level. So that's what has been labeled for you. At A, also, we talk about the levels. So you make sure you use the right words. And at B, here we talk about growth. So we are at D now. Whatever is happening at C is affecting D. D, we are looking at endometrium lining or uterine or endometrium. Uterine lining, sorry, or the endometrium. And from day 0 to day 7, you can see here that the endometrium is actually breaking down. And that's how we represent the endometrium. And it's breaking down because fertilization did not occur. So this chart represents a woman who did not undergo fertilization. But then from day 7 to day 28, it began to rise again. But that is not enough to prove that the woman is pregnant. Because for you to prove that the woman is pregnant, you have to look at the level of progesterone, the size of the growth of the corpus luteum, and then the level of FSH. All right, so I believe we have actually gained some degree of understanding from this illustration so far. Okay, so we go on. Let's look at this following question. A person undergoes a surgical operation to remove her ovaries on both sides. Remember, there are two ovaries. So she did a surgical operation to remove her ovaries on both sides. Explain why this person will not menstruate. So this just for 3 marks. And like I told you earlier on, the menstrual cycle mostly deals with explanation, providing an explanation using the hormones. So here is the thing: uh, the ovaries are gone; they are removed. Now the person is not supposed to menstruate. Yes, can you explain? So to do so, here are the answers. The reason because no follicle will develop. Follicles develop inside the ovaries, and the same follicles that are developing will secrete estrogen. The same estrogen will cause the endometrium to become thick, and then when the follicles are fully matured, they will undergo ovulation, and then corpus luteum will form. This corpus luteum will cause the endometrium will release the hormone progesterone that will cause the endometrium to become even more thicker. If fertilization occur, the endometrium will remain thick and even more thicker. If the endometrium does not occur, the corpus luteum will break down. So here you have to apply logical reasoning. The question said, explain why the person will not menstruate. So you need to think outside the box. What is menstruation? Menstruation is the breakdown of the endometrium. So, what causes the endometrium to form? The endometrium is formed under the influence of estrogen and progesterone. And where do we get estrogen from? We get it from the developing follicle. And where do we get progesterone from? We get it from the corpus luteum after ovulation. So the point here is, can you break something that is not there? Because menstruation is a breakdown of the endometrium. And if there are no follicle to develop, then it means that there will be no estrogen to be produced. I hope it makes sense because we are trying to trace what causes menstruation, and by definition, menstruation is a breakdown of the endometrium. So the endometrium must break down. When the endometrium is breaking down, that's what is called menstruation. So that is key, and you have to know that you can't break something that is not there. So before you can break the endometrium, it's supposed to have been there for you to break it. So if the ovaries are removed and they are gone, then there will be no follicle. The follicles are there to produce estrogen. If the follicles are gone, then it means there will be no estrogen. If there are no estrogen, then it means that there will be no progesterone because estrogen is released from the follicle. The follicle will mature to become a Graafian follicle and it will break open and it will form a corpus luteum. And the corpus luteum is what will produce progesterone. That means the sources of estrogen and progesterone are not there, hence they won't be there. And because there are no estrogen and progesterone, then it means that there will be no endometrium because the endometrium is actually formed by the action of estrogen and progesterone. That means the endometrium will not develop. That is key. Like I said, the meaning of menstruation is a breakdown of the endometrium. So here is a case we don't even have the endometrium. It is not there because the factors that will cause it to form, the chemicals that will cause it to form, they are also not there. So if there is no endometrium, then it means that there'll be nothing to break because you can't break something that's not there. Hence, it ends by saying, therefore, the endometrium will not develop. To be shed, another word for shed means to break during menstruation. So this is actually a reverse reasoning. Here is where you are thinking in reverse. You are looking at a question where which demands that you look at it, you think in the opposite direction. Now that will not actually attract 3 marks. This is a typical 5 mark question. So and that is a thing. You need to know the hormones, you need to know their source, and then you must explain what will happen if they are there and what will not happen if those hormones are not there. Or you need to know the source of the hormones. You must be able to tell what will happen if the source is there or what will not happen if the source is not there. And that is how we reason through the menstrual cycle. Obviously, there are things to label, there are some functions to state, there are some simple things you can go about. But these are some of the areas that demands explanation, and explanation demands thinking outside the box. So let's look at the major terms here. Menstruation. What is menstruation? It is a monthly shedding of the uterine lining, also called endometrium, in women and in individuals with a uterus. What is corpus luteum? It is a temporary endocrine structure in the ovary that forms after ovulation. So these are basic terminological uh, words that we need to know, and they are often used in exams. Lastly, what about the endometrium? What is it? It is the inner lining of the uterus that plays a crucial role in the menstrual cycle and pregnancy. Well, so to move further away from the menstrual cycle, there is this part of the menstrual cycle, yes, or of the human reproductive system, which is very important, and it deals with the negative feedback mechanism involving FSH and progesterone. And in this particular situation, sometimes they'll ask you to describe. Describe means write the steps or the events that will occur, but sometimes they can ask you to explain. So, what is a negative feedback mechanism? It is a mechanism that detects any imbalances within the body and then restores it back to normal. For example, the average human body temperature is 37 degrees. In a hot day or during a hot day, sometimes the temperature of the body begins to rise above 37. Now, this will be detected by a system in the body and then the system will correct it. So let's say if your body temperature is 37 and during summer, if it rises to let's say 40 degrees, your body will notice, it will detect the increment and then it will bring it back down to 37. It will do everything to make sure that that temperature returns back to 37 degrees Celsius. And that mechanism that detects the imbalances and restores it back to normal is what is called the negative feedback mechanism. So we have the same thing occurring, a mechanism occurring between FSH and progesterone. And this is another unit under the topic. Remember, I said the topic is divided into anatomy and then the menstrual cycle. Now that the menstrual cycle too, we have this unique spot for FSH and progesterone. There are there is always a spot. There are always questions set on this particular concept, what is called the negative feedback mechanism involving FSH and progesterone. When you're approaching this, you need to know the source of FSH and progesterone. Sometimes they can use the source to set a question. So you have to know FSH is produced by pituitary gland, progesterone by corpus luteum. So sometimes they can play with the source. If there is no corpus luteum, it means there will be no progesterone. If there is progesterone, it means there is corpus luteum. And sometimes they set questions on the size of the corpus luteum because sometimes the corpus luteum can be large, sometimes it can be small. The larger the corpus luteum, the higher the level of progesterone. The smaller the corpus luteum, the lower the level of progesterone. And there are things that will have to happen to cause the corpus luteum to become large or small. So I've divided the negative feedback mechanism into two for convenience sake. So the first part deals with fertilization of the ovum. If the ovum is fertilized, what is going to happen? The corpus luteum remains active. It means it becomes large. It remains large, and it continues to secrete what? Progesterone. In fact, corpus luteum is the source of it. And then what's going to happen? An increased concentration of progesterone will inhibit. The word inhibit means prevent or stop. It will stop the pituitary gland from secreting FSH. What's going to happen is that FSH secretion levels in the blood decreases. Hence, no follicle development in the ovary. In other words, oogenesis does not occur. So it ends there. I'll be saying it. So questions can be set like explain um, the circumstances that will cause oogenesis not to occur. Explain the situation or the circumstances that will cause oogenesis not to occur. For oogenesis not to occur, then it means that the ovum will have to be fertilized. That means the corpus luteum will have to remain large so that it will continue to secrete progesterone. Then you must keep on writing. That means you have to write whatever is on your screen now. I mean, these are the events that will prevent oogenesis. Or how do you prevent oogenesis in a person? Just fertilize the ovum so that the corpus luteum will remain large. It will continue to secrete progesterone. Then the increased concentration of progesterone will stop or inhibit pituitary gland from secreting FSH. Then the FSH level will decrease in the blood. Hence, there will be no oogenesis or no new follicle development. And that is how we approach negative feedback. So, one side of the story is to opposite the other. Now, there's another way you can also look at it. Because there's no oogenesis, it means that there will be no what? Ovulation. There will be no ovulation because ovulation is a release of the ovum. You can't release something that is not there. So the ovum will have to be there for you to release it. So no ovulation will take place. In other words, menstruation will not occur since the woman is what? Pregnant. So that is the negative feedback side. Then we have the other side of the coin that deals with if the ovum is not fertilized or if fertilization does not occur. If the ovum is not fertilized, then mean the corpus luteum degenerates. It will shrink automatically or it will become smaller. Then eventually it will stop producing or secreting progesterone. When the level of progesterone decreases, the FSH secretion increases in the blood. So you have to watch the behavior of the two hormones, FSH and progesterone. When the level of one is high, the level of the other drops. It's just automated. It's an automated thing, just automatic. So you have to explain why would the level of FSH increase? It will increase because pituitary gland is no longer inhibited. To inhibit means prevent or to stop. And then because FSH is high and pituitary gland is no longer inhibited, it means a new follicle starts to develop. And that means oogenesis occurs. That statement there means oogenesis will now occur. And what will happen because as a result of oogenesis is that menstruation will now take place. That is, if the woman is not pregnant. If the woman is pregnant, no menstruation. If menstruation occur, it means the woman is not pregnant. So one side of the story is the opposite of the other. Sometimes the questions can be direct and like telling you, describe the negative feedback mechanism involving FSH and progesterone. If the ovum is not fertilized, then what do? You write what is on your screen. If the question talks about describe what will happen if the couple's luteum remains small, then another word for small means it shrinks or degenerates. Then you write also what is on your screen. Or describe the negative feedback mechanism if a person is pregnant. If a person is pregnant, it means that fertilization occurred. Then you have to write the circumstance. Mostly, this such questions attracts about 5 marks. And it's very important. It actually occupies a spot in every exam, so you have to watch out. Don't just skip it or browse over it. Make sure you pay attention to it. Learn one side and actually write the opposite. So I will recommend you learn one side, know it very well, and you need to think. Sometimes you have to also help yourself. So you learn one side and then you think through the question. Always concentrate on the corpus luteum, it being large or small. And that is what the two processes are trying to tell you. If the corpus luteum is large, it means the woman is automatically pregnant. You can't be pregnant without fertilization. You can't fertilize an ovum that is not there. So that means ovulation should have occurred already. So it demands that you think outside the box. And you can't be pregnant and menstruate naturally like that. Naturally. Natural. Talking about natural thing. You can't be pregnant and menstruate at the same time. Naturally, you can't. So study one side, know it very well. If the same thing you have studied is asked in exams, then you write it down. If they ask about the opposite of it, then you think outside the box and write the opposite of all of it. It demands that you memorize and you approach. So it is about the two hormones, FSH and progesterone. That is, if the level of progesterone is high in the blood, it will prevent the pituitary gland from secreting FSH. Hence, FSH will be low. So the two hormones, they don't see eye to eye. They are not on the same level. When one is high, the other is low. When the other is low, the other is high. And there are situations that occur. You have to be able to explain what will cause progesterone to be high. You must be able to explain what can cause FSH to be low or high. Let's look at this question. It's a typical examination type question, 2023 November, paper 1. Explain why a woman will not conceive if she has corpus luteum cyst that does not disappear. So, like I told you, you have to use the source of the hormones to explain. FSH is secreted by pituitary gland, progesterone secreted by corpus luteum. So, if the source is not there, the hormone won't be there. So, here they are dealing with the source. Explain why a woman will not conceive, meaning the woman will not be pregnant if she has corpus luteum cyst that does not disappear. So if you look carefully, what does it say? This was the answer. The corpus luteum remains active or large because it does not disappear and continues to secrete what? Progesterone. An increased concentration of progesterone inhibits the pituitary gland from secreting FSH. FSH secretion level in the blood decreases, hence no follicle development in the ovary. Oogenesis does not occur. Now, without oogenesis, there will be no fertilization. Without fertilization, the woman can't be pregnant. So here is not talking about a woman who is pregnant. Ovulation has occurred. The woman wasn't pregnant, but the corpus luteum remained large. It did not disappear. So that is the key logic here. Corpus luteum cyst does not disappear. Meaning after ovulation, remember ovulation does not guarantee fertilization. So ovulation occurred, the woman is not pregnant, but then corpus luteum that was formed after ovulation or that afterwards did not disappear. It remained large. So for as long as the corpus luteum is large, it will keep on secreting progesterone and making the cause or causing the level of progesterone to rise. And the high level of progesterone will inhibit pituitary gland from secreting FSH. So it ends by saying Hence, no follicle development in the ovary. That is, oogenesis does not occur. No ovulation will take place. You can't fertilize an ovum that is not there because oogenesis did not occur. So this is a typical logical reasoning type of question. Okay, so let's break away from the menstrual cycle. In conclusion, you need to know about the definitions of the following. You need to know about fertilization and development of zygote to blastocyst. You have to know the meaning of copulation and fertilization. So, what is copulation? It is the introduction of the male sex organ into the female sex canal, followed by a discharge of semen. These are basic terms you need to know. What is fertilization? It occurs when the nucleus of a sperm cell and the nucleus of an ovum fuse to form a zygote. Pay attention to the word nucleus. It's not just a sperm cell and ovum fusing. It's not a sperm cell. It's also not a sperm cell and an egg. We don't use the word egg. We use the word ovum. For fertilization definition to be correct, you have to use the word nucleus of the sperm cell. As you can see on your screen in the picture there, the whole sperm won't enter the ovum. It is only the nucleus which is in the head. So that is the definition we want. And you need to also know about the process of fertilization. You must be able to describe it. And it's just a simple scenario about 5 steps. That is, during copulation, the penis is inserted into the vagina and sperm cells are released through ejaculation close to the cervix. The sperm cells swim through the cervix up into the uterus and through the fallopian tube. Then we go on. The haploid ovum released during ovulation enters the fallopian tube. If an ovum is present in the fallopian tube, one sperm cell may penetrate through the jelly layer and fertilize the ovum, resulting in a diploid zygote. The nucleus of the ovum and the nucleus of the sperm cell fuse, resulting in fertilization. So, after fertilization, what happens? So, on your screen, we have a zygote forming. So the zygote forms immediately after fertilization. Check this, the small circles inside. You can see that there are two. Over here, we have two circles. So you have to know fertilization has occurred. That's the difference between a zygote and an egg. Sorry, no, like I said, we use ovum, but sorry for the diagram here. So that's supposed to be an ovum. So an ovum is haploid, a zygote is diploid. You can see there are two nuclei there. And then the zygote will now start developing. It will start undergoing mitosis, and mitosis will cause the zygote to undergo cell division to form the morula. So we have the morula forming immediately after the zygote is formed, and then it will keep on the morula will keep on undergoing mitosis, and then it will lead to the formation of the blastocyst or the blastula. Then afterwards, implantation occurs. So this is a cycle of embryonic development from fertilization to implantation. So there's this a typical examination type question for 4 marks. Describe the development of a zygote until implantation. So you need to know this is actually in the exams guide. It's something you can't actually ignore. If it is in the exams guide, expect it in exams. You are asked to just describe. So you just state the steps. And you have to know fertilization has already occurred. Hence, you shouldn't include it in the answer. You simply write the result of fertilization. That is the formation of zygote. So zygote divides by mitosis to form a ball of cells called morula. And as you can see, the marking guide, the marks are given for mentioning the keywords. And the morula keep on dividing to form a hollow ball of cells called the blastula or blastocyst. You must use the word blastula because most learners ends up writing blastocyte. Blastocyte is a special cell. It's a special type of red blood cell. But then uh, learners keep on writing it. So I'll advise you, make sure you stick with the word blastula instead of the word blastocyst. Then we go on to the next one. You start by saying what is the difference between a morula and a blastula. So what is a morula? A morula is a solid ball-like mass of cells when the zygote undergoes mitosis. So that is a morula. A morula is a solid ball-like mass of cells when the zygote undergoes mitosis. And then a blastula is a hollow ball of cells that is fluid-filled structure that penetrates there that prepares for implantation. So a blastula is actually, I'm using the word blastula because it is safer to use that word other than the word blastocyst, where you end up writing blastocyte. So a blastula is a hollow ball of cells, fluid-filled structure that prepares for implantation. What is implantation? It is an attachment of the blastula to the wall of the uterus at the start of pregnancy. So that's the meaning. Make sure you know it is just a basic definition of it. And then here we're supposed to write the role of estrogen and progesterone in maintaining pregnancy. So, what are the functions of estrogen and progesterone in maintaining pregnancy? So, we look at it here. Estrogen stimulates the endometrium to become thick, and then the progesterone maintains pregnancy by maintaining the thickness of the endometrium as it further stimulates the endometrium to become even more thicker, more glandular, and more vascular. So, uh, you're actually using the functions to explain. There's nothing strange. You won't be asked questions outside the curriculum, and you can't add your own opinion. Your opinion is not accepted, it is not welcome. We don't want your opinion, so you use your own, use what is written. Differentiate between gestation and pregnancy. So, gestation is the period of development of the fetus in the uterus, which takes place from conception to birth. And then pregnancy refers to all the changes, referring to hormonal, physical, and emotional changes that take place in the body of a female as a result of the developing fetus. So note that gestation deals with time, that is period here, and pregnancy refers to the changes that takes place in the body. So a person can be pregnant for just one day, but we have to know it takes 9 months for uh, pregnancy to occur, for an embryo to be fully developed. So you can be pregnant for one day or 1 week, and then a miscarriage might occur, but the time it takes for full pregnancy until birth is what is called gestation. Then we need to also know the functions of the following, which is very, very important for for learning sake. We have to know about chorion and chorionic villi, amnion, amniotic sac, and amniotic fluid, umbilical cord, including umbilical artery and then umbilical vein. You have to know the functions of the placenta. You have to know the functions of the amniotic cavity, and I've listed it here. The amniotic cavity is the fluid-filled space that surrounds the developing fetus. It provides protection for fetus against trauma and mechanical injury. It also allows for free movement of the fetus as it grows and develops. So you have the functions of the amniotic cavity. It is often not asked in exams, so at least you have something here. All right, so this will be the last component, the last final component of this topic. So we're going to look at the functions of the different parts of a developing fetus. All right, so let's start by looking at the parts of a developing fetus in the uterus quickly. And you have to learn how to label this. You have to be able to learn how to label the different parts and the functions of those parts as well. You need to know it very well for examination's sake. In doing so, I'll be taking you through the functions, but make sure you do your part, learn how to draw, how to label. Even if you don't know how to draw, get a question. You already have questions. I've given you a lot of questions. So get some of them that actually require that you label. Remember, I gave you some few questions back some time ago in the package. Go and check from the package. There are such diagrams there that you can label. So we are going to deal with the parts of the fetus in the reproductive system of a female. And in doing so, we are going to start by looking at the placenta. So The placenta, you have to be able to describe the structure, is an oval vascular structure in the uterus, and it nourishes the fetus. What is the functions of the placenta? Uh, it is actually involved in many other things. So we have some here, very simple. It is involved in gaseous exchange between the mother and the fetus. The placenta is there to provide nutrients to the fetus. It is also there to secrete progesterone, which is a hormone that thickens the endometrium to make it even more thicker, more vascular, more glandular. Yeah, apart from this, the placenta also does other things. It acts as a barrier or a microfilter to protect the fetus from harmful pathogens and toxins while allowing beneficial substances to pass through for passive immunity. So, in other words, the placenta prevents bacteria, viruses, and some toxic substances from uh, moving from the mother to the fetus. So, if the mother smokes, the mother takes in some dangerous chemicals and it enters the blood, the placenta is able to filter it, it's able to block those harmful things from affecting the child. And that is what we call a microfilter. So it provides protection. Moreover, the placenta also secretes more progesterone into the blood, hence increasing the thickness of the endometrium. You can learn any of these functions. Go for simple ones, such as providing nutrients to the fetus and also gaseous exchange, supplying the child with oxygen and removing carbon dioxide from the child. Now, let's go on to the next one, which is the chorionic villi. So, what does it do? What is it? The chorionic villi is actually a finger like structure, just like your fingers. That's how they appear like. They are finger like projections of the chorion, which project or move into the blood space in the uterus of the mother. And what does it do? It provides maximum contact with maternal blood and it forms part of the placenta. So you are just supposed to list the functions only. And then we go on to the umbilical cord. What does the umbilical cord do? What is the structure like? It's a flexible cord-like structure. You have to check the diagram to look at it. It's a flexible cord-like structure containing the umbilical arteries and umbilical vein, attaching the fetus to the placenta or connecting the fetus to the placenta. What is its function? We're going to start. Remember, there are two blood vessels inside, which are very important. So we start with the umbilical arteries. What do they do? They carry oxygen, they carry, sorry, carbon dioxide and metabolic waste away from the child, away from the embryo to the placenta. So use the word artery. You know, the word artery start with the letter A. A means away. Here the focus is the fetus. So the umbilical arteries moves carbon dioxide or it transport carbon dioxide and metabolic waste away from the fetus to the placenta. What about the umbilical vein? It carries or transport oxygen and nutrients from the placenta to the fetus. So that is what it does. Let's go to the chorion. The chorion, it is the outermost extra embryonic membrane covering the amnion. So check the diagram there. You can see there are two layers around the fetus. The outer layer is what is called the chorion. What does it do? That is the functions. It forms the chorionic villi, which forms part of the placenta. Then we go on to the inner layer. The inner layer is the amnion. What is its structure? The inner, that is, it is the innermost extra embryonic membrane. What is its function? It secretes the amniotic fluid and protects the developing world, fetus. Um, So that is a diagram there. Make sure you take note of it. Then there's a space between the amnion and the fetus. What is it? So we go to the amniotic fluid. What is this? What is its structure? It is the fluid contained inside the amniotic sac. What is it function? It performs three functions. You have to know them and know them very well. First, it acts as a shock absorber. And then secondly, and in fact, the word shock absorber means it is able to protect the child against mechanical injury. It doesn't just protect the child, it can also reduce the impact on the mother as well, any mechanical force. So it acts as a shock absorber against and also protects the embryo against mechanical injury, mechanical impact or injury. Secondly, it protects the fetus against large temperature changes, that is fluctuations. When it's too cold, the child won't feel it. When it's too hot, the child won't feel it, because when it's very hot, it's going to be relatively cool, or the temperature will be normal and suitable for the embryo. When it's extremely hot, the amniotic fluid will cause the will make sure that the temperature around the fetus is optimum. It provides the child with optimum and temperature environment for or temperature conditions for the fetus. And lastly, it protects fetus against desiccation. Desiccation means dryness. So the amniotic fluid, it makes sure that the child feels fresh and it's not dry. It also allows the child to move freely inside the uterus without any mechanical injury. So this is a diagram of the fetus in the uterus. Make sure you learn it very well and you must be able to label. So here we have the structure of the developing fetus again, and we have zoomed in on the placenta to observe how the fetus is connected to the mother. So here you can see the blood of the mother and the blood of the fetus do not mix. If they end up mixing, the mother's immune system will attack the child's immune system, which might lead to the death of the child. It occurs most often. And so there is actually a barrier, okay, where the blood of the child and the mother won't mix. So if you look carefully, we have the endometrium, which is very thick, and it's also the site for implantation. That is where you will find the placenta. The placenta is actually implanted inside the endometrium. So it is necessary for the endometrium to become very thick. It will only become thicker under the influence of progesterone. So the placenta itself will release a lot of progesterone to ensure that the endometrium is already thick. Then we look at how the fetus is connected to the placenta, and it is via the umbilical cord. So if you zoom it in, the umbilical cord consists of two blood vessels. We have umbilical vein, and umbilical vein supplies the child with essential nutrients and immunoglobulins, as well as oxygen to the fetus, because the interest is not the mother now, the interest is now the fetus. So the nutrient from the mother's bloodstream will flow through the umbilical cord, specifically the umbilical vein, and it will be transmitted to the fetus. And then we have here the umbilical artery. The umbilical artery moves in the opposite direction. It moves away from the fetus towards the placenta. So metabolic waste and then carbon dioxide are all transported away from the fetus to um, the placenta. This is to ensure that the fetus is safe and healthy, and the mother too is safe. So the topic is about reproductive system, which deals with the tendency to bring forth new offspring, to produce new offspring. What if we don't want to have children? What if we don't want to have kids? That will take us to birth control methods. Though it is not listed in the exams guide, it is a concept that acts in reverse, okay, to the entire process because the aim is to reproduce, and over here you are trying to do the opposite. So we are trying to reason in reverse with regards to the process. If you don't want to have a child, what will you do? So we need to look at some of the birth control methods. In males, we have vasectomy. Remember, the purpose of the different parts of the male reproductive system is to ensure that the person is able to reproduce. And what do you need to reproduce? You need everything that you are seeing on the screen to be able to reproduce. You need the testes, you need the epididymis, you need the vas deferens, you need the corpus gland, seminal fluid, prostate gland. You need all of them to work together. If one structure fails, if there are no testes, the person can reproduce. If the seminal vesicles are non-functional, the person won't be able to reproduce. If one part of the system is damaged, it won't be able to achieve its mission. So if you don't want to reproduce, you just have to do away with some of the parts. But some parts uh, have serious consequence on the person if they are removed. For example, you can remove the testes, you can block the vas deferens, but removing the corpus gland or removing the prostate gland might have other consequence on the individual. So you have to go for the safer side, for the safer part, without attracting any adverse situation. So when you block the vas deferens, what have you done? Spermatogenesis will go on normally. The testes will produce hormones. It will produce sperms. They will be temporarily stored in the epididymis, but they won't be transported through the vas deferens because it has been blocked or it is blocked. It has been cut. You have actually tied it. So the person will still have normal physiological feelings, sexual feelings, will engage in sexual activity normally. The person who is able to ejaculate will release semen, but the semen will not contain sperm cells. And the reason because the vas deferens um, are actually cut or blocked. So this is what actually occurs because it has been blocked. Uh, the sperms won't be able uh, to join the seminal to join the semen to move out. So that's a normal male reproductive system with no part of it touched. And what we do for male, we can do similar for female. No, females reproductive system consists of two fallopian tube and two ovaries. If you don't want to reproduce, you can do what's called tubal ligation. You block the fallopian tube, and then oogenesis will occur, but then there will be no fertilization. The woman will menstruate. Everything is going to be normal, except she won't be able to be pregnant because the sperm cells will not be able to reach the ovum. The ovum also will not be able to reach the sperm cells on both ends. If you block one side and you leave the other side not blocked, the woman will be pregnant because if ovulation occurs on the unblocked side, fertilization will occur. So if you really want to prevent pregnancy, you have to block both sides. That is a choice if the individual would wish to. Now, these birth control methods are explained and they are applied based on the understanding of the anatomical structure and functions of the reproductive system of male and female, as well as the hormonal functions within the menstrual cycle. And also in the case of male, also with regards to puberty, remember, males produce testosterone. So if a person doesn't want to reproduce, you can apply your knowledge in both areas, anatomical and physiological, to to solve these things. In all these things, you have to know the functions of individual part. The fallopian tube is a site for fertilization. It helps to transport the ovum into the uterus. Hence, if it is blocked, sperm cells will not be able to reach the ovum, and then the ovum also not be able to reach the fallopian tube. What's going to be the consequence? The consequence will be the opposite of the functions of the fallopian tube because it is a site for fertilization. If it is blocked, they mean that fertilization will not occur. It will not be able to transport also the ovum to the uterus. So I'm recommending you take your time, read your notes, solve the questions in the package, and then you can. It's an opportunity to you can watch the video one more time. If you have any question, you can approach me. We can sit down and we can have it discussed. Thank you very much. So that is the end of the video. Thank you. That's the end of the presentation.